As a parental philosophy, I think there's basically three things you teach your kids.
This morning I'm pleased to say that I have someone who I'm meeting for the second time. Actually, we were in an event together, and he was so kind to say that, yeah, Lance, I'll do your podcast. So let's start talking with Byron. Byron? Nice to meet you.
Well, thank you very much.
Again? Second time?
Yes.
Again, second time. Let's start off with, where were you born?
I was born in Mount Clemens, Michigan, which is in southeast Michigan, north of Detroit.
Okay.
My father was born in downtown, and his father was born downtown Detroit, and he taught in the public schools for about 32 years.
What did he teach?
He taught history, and to make a little extra money, he taught driver's education.
So he was in high school?
Yep, he was at Osborne High School on the east side of Detroit, Detroit Public Schools.
So you remember when they had those simulators, those actual cars, kind of like half of a car? It wasn't a car, they were simulators.
Well, he actually had a driving range. So they had real cars, and this was in Detroit. Getting a driver's license is a rite of passage.
That's Motor City, right?
Motor
you got
City.
that right.
Yeah, and so they invested in making sure that everybody at 16 had a car, or at least a license.
But couldn't you get at that time, I think we got our license at 15 and a half.
You could.
That was your permit, driver's permit,
you get a driving
but you
permit.
had to have someone with you that had a full license.
Exactly.
Right, then 16 you got the full license.
Exactly. So he was in the public schools until he retired.
Your mother?
She worked a lot of different jobs. She worked at the Red Cross. Mm-hmm. She worked for the local carpenters union. She worked for
wait. Now go through that. Locals Carpenter Union.
Right.
Administration.
Yeah, she was an admin.
Okay,
she was not a carpenter.
Okay.
My mom was not a carpenter.
So don't forget, both of us are baby boomers.
Right.
So sometimes I have to rejuggle it because I talk to people younger.
That's right.
Because if we're talking to someone now, they'd be offended.
Exactly. There you go. I'm with you.
I say, of course she was a carpenter. She's a carpenter. She's,
Right. She was in the office.
Right.
And so she worked at the local carpenters union. And,
right.
And then, one summer through that, she got me a job working on a construction site. So,
is that right?
Really heavy lifting, big 2x12s and floor joists and things.
Now you told me before we started the podcast that you came from a family of 5?
Yes.
5 siblings?
5 siblings.
And you're the youngest of 5?
I am the youngest, yes.
So they had 3 girls and then 2 boys.
Correct.
And you came out the bottom.
Yep.
Are they still, you said the oldest sister passed away?
Yes, my oldest sister passed away of breast cancer maybe 20 years ago now.
Oh, wow. Are your parents still with us?
Nope. My father died, they're both passed. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh. Did they stay together the whole time?
Yep, they were together. They married, she was 19, and he was her gymnastics teacher in East McKeesport, Pennsylvania.
Wait. Whoa.
I know, he was 21, and she was 19,
okay,
and it was just before the war, World War II.
And he was a gymnastics instructor.
He was a gymnastics instructor.
Did he do gymnastics?
He did until he got married, and then he just stopped exercising.
But I was a gymnast.
Oh yeah, I know.
I was a competitive gymnast.
Yeah, he worked. There was the Germans. He's German ethnicity.
Right.
And the German Americans had this nationwide kind of
that's right.
The turn fry, and so it was German-based kind of gymnastics programs.
That's right.
And they set one up. He was from Detroit, but he went to East McKeesport for a job in one of these German American-run gymnastics groups.
Okay.
And my mother was 19, and she was one of his students, and that's it.
They hit it off?
They hit it off.
Spotted her one time and said, hey.
That's it. She's from...
Let's go. That's good. Wow.
Yeah.
That's nice. That's nice to hear. So your other siblings are still alive, and they're doing well. Do you contact them often?
Weekly. We have weekly Zoom calls.
Is that right? That's good.
For the last 3.5 years.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah, it's wonderful. It's a really tight family. I'm very appreciative.
How many times have they made you an uncle?
I have to count. Maybe 6.
You've been 6 times?
Maybe 6, maybe 7.
Wow.
Yeah, so.
That's nice.
Yeah, it's nice. We're very fortunate to have. I'm very fortunate to have siblings who care about me, and we care about each other. Because we all know people who don't have that.
Right.
They never talk to their sibling, and it's such a kind of a missed opportunity, I think, because there are very few people closer than your siblings.
Wouldn't you
potentially?
Think? Wouldn't you think? That's true.
That's
true. So give me a brief synopsis of how you grew up. What was it like for you growing up in Detroit?
Sure. Like I said, I grew up in Mount Clemens, and Mount Clemens it's on, if you know the movie 8 Mile Road.
Yes.
That's the border between.
Isn't that Eminem?
Eminem. And the reason it's called 8 Mile is because that's the border between Detroit City and the suburbs.
Okay.
So you cross 8 Mile, you're now officially out of Detroit. And so 8 Mile is code for the city. And so we were at 16 Mile.
Which means you
It
were
was
in
8
the
miles,
city.
8 miles north
Oh,
of 8 miles north of 8 Mile.
8
so
Mile,
we,
okay.
yeah. So we were north. We were at the time in Mount Clemens. It was founded in 1820 something or that.
Now, is that good or bad?
It depends. I mean, you know.
Was that upper or lower? You're not in the city.
It was middle class.
Middle class, okay.
Yeah. So
gotcha.
Mount Clemens, I mean, you have the gross points and the Ford money, the Dodge money, the Fisher body plant money, and the mansions, just north of the city. And then as you go further north, it gets increasingly blue collar.
Okay.
And so by the time you get to 8 Mile, it's pretty blue collar.
Gotcha.
Or to 16 Mile, I should say.
Okay.
And so when I grew up, you know, we had Motown. I'm sure you know American Bandstand, right?
Of course.
Well, we had our own Detroit version called Robyn Seymour's Swingin' Time.
See, now I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Of course, because everything was
So
divided then.
we
yeah.
saw Aretha Franklin, the Supremes, Smokey Robinson, Stevie Wonder, years before everybody else.
When they were just starting.
When they were just starting. He was little Stevie Wonder. Yeah? And so we would see them on Robyn Seymour's Swingin' Time, and nobody in the nation knew who these people were. But they were just phenomenal, of course, right? And so we had, and you grew up, you had that Motown going on, and then you had the kind of white rock, you know, the Bob Segers,
Right.
You know, the MC5, those people, right? And so you had this contrast. And then we had a incredible racial tension.
Of course.
We had the
That was the
riots in
time.
'67.
But they never call. They won't say anything about Detroit. It's the LA riots.
Yeah, well, they talk, well, in Detroit,
In
we talk
Detroit,
about
they
Detroit.
talked about it.
Yeah.
Every major city had a riot.
There were
But
lots of them.
there
Yeah,
were
but
so
40
many.
people, 47 people got killed
Yes.
in Detroit.
In Detroit, okay.
Yeah, I mean the National Guard flew down there, and it was bad. And so you asked about my growing up. I mean, one of the things I tell people about Detroit is, you could always say this, and this year's terrible, but next year will be worse. And it was just this constant spiral down into, you know, this kind of dystopian RoboCop kind of environment.
Yes.
I mean, they set RoboCop in Detroit for a reason. It, you know, post-industrial, apocalyptic kind of environment. And the reason I'm telling you that, if you go to Detroit now, I don't know if you've been there, it has made this incredible comeback. So the last 10 years in Detroit, it's just been nothing but upward. And it's just amazing to go down there now. So I encourage you, all your podcast viewers, go to Detroit. You'll love it.
They've been maintaining the roads, no potholes, all that.
They redid all the roads, all the bridges.
Don't they have
all of
is
the
that
old
where the L
buildings.
train is? The L train's in, is
No,
that Chicago?
No,
that's
in
Chicago.
Chicago. We have something called the People Mover, which is
People
useless.
Mover, okay.
It's useless, but and then we have one thing called the Q line, which goes up and down Woodward Boulevard. But it's public transportation. Don't get your hopes up.
So you better get a car.
You need a car.
Okay.
But all of the old buildings that have remained have all been refurbished. So you got these majestic buildings from the late 19th
was this
century.
gentrification? Is that where?
Well,
Was it a more like of a ghetto-ish area first, and then white people came in like they did in Harlem?
Well, what happened? I mean, the neighborhoods.
Okay.
People don't understand how big physically Detroit is. I may get this wrong, but I think you could put New York, Philadelphia, Boston all together inside the city of Detroit.
Okay.
I mean, it's just huge. And the neighborhoods just emptied out when the white flight occurred beginning in the late 50s, 60s, and then accelerated after the riots. And so you had intense poverty in the burbs. I mean, in the
Inner city, yes.
in the inner city neighborhoods, and the downtown was a ghost town because the businesses had also left to relocate to offices in the suburbs. But what happened was, I think, a combination of things. They threw the corrupt mayor in jail. They elected an honest mayor. The governor forced the city into bankruptcy. So I don't know if your viewers are Republican or Democrat, but the city is very Democrat. The governor at the time was Republican. And he forced the city into bankruptcy. And the Democrats didn't want it because he thought they were coming after the pensions of the firefighters and the teachers and the police. But it was a brilliant move. because they wrote off $6 billion of debt and took the money that they have and have reinvested it into the city. And so they cleaned the books, cleaned the government, put in fiscal responsibility, and then they had two big kind of entrepreneurs come in. One was the Illiches, who own Little Caesars Pizza.
Yes.
They're the Little Caesars Pizza billionaires. And they're originally from Detroit.
Okay.
And so they kept their money in the city. And then Dan Gilbert, who owns the Cleveland Cavaliers and Rocket Mortgage. And for some reason, I don't know what his connection to Detroit is, but he came to Detroit in the bad times and has invested billions in buying real estate and refurbishing old buildings.
Where were you during all this time, and how
I
old were
was
you during
mainly
this time?
here. So a lot of this comeback happened in the early 2000s.
Oh, in 2000s. When
Yeah.
did you come to Japan?
First, 78,
For what?
a backpacker.
Wait. Okay, let's go through your schooling. So you go through school, you're pretty good in school.
No, I mean high school, you mean? Yeah, I went through high school.
You didn't go to college?
Well, I did, but I didn't go straight through. So I went.
So after high school,
after
what
high
kind of
school-
student were you in high school?
I was pretty good. I mean, I was good enough to get into the University of Michigan.
Okay, so what did you focus on? What did you like?
I liked science.
Did you? Do you
Yeah.
still do that? Do you still
Yeah, I do. Yeah, so my PhD is in marine biology.
Okay. Is that what you're teaching now too?
Nope, I teach economics and trade, and I'll get there.
All right, good. Wow. Okay, all right, Byron. Let's do it.
So I didn't go straight through college. So I went from high school to college. And like I said, my father's a teacher, my mother's working, trying to support 5 kids. There's no money for tuition. So I'm spending my own money and taking out student loans. And kind of aimless. I'm taking random classes and I'm going.
This is because you did straight from high school to college. You
correct.
said
Yeah.
All right.
Back then there wasn't the concept of a gap year.
There's nothing, no.
Yeah, that didn't exist back
Right,
then.
right. Did you do? How many years did you do?
Well, I did 2 years.
Okay.
And then my roommate was an Asian studies major from New York City. And he said, I'm going to go to Kansai Gaidai for a semester to study Japanese. And then after, I'm going to travel around Southeast Asia. Do you want to join me? And I said, look, this is between my job. I need to declare a major when you go into your junior year. And I said, look, I don't know what I'm going to study. So sure. So I quit college, worked a couple jobs, morning, night, to save some money, and flew to Tokyo to meet him in 1978. And I'll never forget, I got here on New Year's Day, and we took the local trains from here to Kyoto.
You flew into Haneda.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Neither of us had money for a Shinkansen or anything,
Okay, all right.
right? So we're taking local trains all the way to Kyoto. But then we backpacked in Southeast Asia, together for 3 months, and then he went back, and then I continued for another 13 months. So I backpacked for a year and a half.
Where'd you go?
Tokyo, Japan. We went to Japan, Taiwan, Hong Kong, Thailand, Malaysia, Singapore, Indonesia, and then back up the same route. All third class. So,
Okay. What do you remember the most from that?
oh man, there's so many memories.
Give me some of them.
The people. One of the things I learned, when you're American in Southeast Asia in '78, this is 3 years after the Vietnam War ended, there was a lot of poverty. But you realize is some of the most generous, nicest people you'll ever meet are the people with the fewest things to offer, material things. They got no food, but they'll share it with you. They've got no space, but here's a place for your backpack. Just move the kids over. You go to a campus and say, oh yeah, you can. You go to find somebody that looks friendly. You say, can I sleep in your dorm? They said, yeah, you can sleep on the floor of my dorm. And so we did a lot of that. And you realize that, the vast majority of people in the world are really nice and generous. And that has sustained me. I mean, right now we're in these very difficult, dark times, particularly in the United States. And there's a lot of animosity and hate. But I'm convinced that deep down, most people are good. Most people are good. They want to be good.
I believe so. I do. Thank you.
And so, that's what
I do.
Well, that's
I
my
focus on
biggest
that.
memory. And then the culture. So after a year and a half, I went back to Michigan
Okay.
Now I know what I want to study.
Okay.
I want to major in Asian studies, but I also have an interest in biology, in science. And I said, well, look, I'm going to learn aquaculture, and I'm going to work for the United Nations, the World Food Organization, and teach aquaculture to people to raise their standards of living. It was kind of a dream, kind of a 60s thing.
Right, you had to.
Yeah.
But you didn't want to join the Peace Corps. What about the
I
military?
thought about that. I almost
What about
did.
the military?
I never thought about the military.
Because Vietnam.
Yeah.
Nobody wanted to do that.
Back then in the 70s, nobody wanted to go in the
I
military.
was drafted,
Yeah. My brother had a number. He did not get drafted, but he had a number.
I had mine was 6.
And I had in Detroit, you're a bridge away from Canada.
Right.
Right.
You got a lot of people that.
We had a cousin who stayed with us one night, and then he's on vacationing in Canada. Is what our parents told us. But now I know better. But there was a lot of animosity towards the military after that war. And so then I went back and double majored in Asian studies and in fisheries, and graduated. So it took me 6 years to get through college.
How were you paid for all this?
Loans.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you graduated.
And then I worked in the summer. I worked in the summer at a resort.
Right.
In north of Chicago.
Right.
And you make $2,000-3,000 in tips, and then so I still have all my loan papers from Michigan.
I bet you do.
Yeah.
I bet you do. That lasted. When were you able to pay off your loans? How old were you?
Oh, well, I deferred them all the way through my PhD.
I know, I'm sure
all the
you
way
did.
through my
I'm
PhD.
sure you did.
And I didn't get my PhD until 88. Okay. So I paid them off sometimes in the 90s.
I hear you. Okay.
So what happened then is I had studied Chinese at the University of Michigan, thinking I would go to China to study aquaculture because that's where it started 2,000 years ago. However, I had done no research, and there were no programs in aquaculture for foreigners to get a master's in. So there's nowhere to go. And so I talked to my advisor, and he said, well, I know a professor at the University of Hiroshima. Would you be interested in going to Japan? And I said, sure. So he wrote a letter to Takahashi-sensei in Hiroshima. And Takahashi-sensei wrote back and said, yeah, here's an application to the university. And by the way, here's an application for a scholarship from the Ministry of Education that they were offering to foreign students at the time. So here's, fill them out and send them in. And so I got in and got the scholarship. And I said, look, free education, come to Japan, come back to Asia, there. And so I flew back here in 1980, went to Hiroshima University, did a one and a half year as a research student, Kinkyusei, 2 years in a master's, graduated with my master's in fisheries in 84.
So you stayed 3 years.
It was 80 to 84.
80, 84, okay.
Yeah,
okay.
3.5 years.
So 4 years, okay.
3.5
I got you, okay.
And then at the time, they did not have a PhD program at the University of Hiroshima. And so my professor there introduced me to a professor at the University of Tokyo. And so I went into Tanaka Sensei's laboratory, and I completed my PhD at the Ocean Research Institute at the University of Tokyo in '88. So I have a PhD, and you'll never guess what the topic was, but it's larval anchovies. The population.
Larval anchovies.
You know those little white fish you eat on top of your tofu?
Yes.
The shirasu?
Right.
Those are anchovies.
Those are anchovies?
Yeah. They're the baby anchovies.
And baby anchovies, okay.
Yeah, and I studied the population dynamics of baby anchovies. There you go. Exactly. Like, what were you thinking? I mean, who in their right mind would do that? And the answer is nobody in their right mind would do that. I was not in my right mind.
Wait, it was all up to you as to what you decided to focus on.
It was his laboratory. He was into statistics and mathematical modeling and things like that. And so we were just looking for topics. I was not particularly interested.
And he said, oh, I got one.
There you go. Yeah. So that's the way it works.
Hey, Byron, I got one for you.
That's the way it works. And I'll set you up, and you take collect your data, and then we'll get everything published. So I graduated in '88 with a PhD in marine biology. But my life changed. My last couple of years in '86, I got invited to a University of Michigan Japan alumni Bonenkai. And I don't know how they tracked me down.
Now, what year was this again? 19?
This was 86.
86. Okay.
86.
That's the year I got married.
I'm halfway.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
It was a good year for both of us.
Listen, tell me about it. So it was a good year for you. You enjoyed that year. 1986.
Well, what happened? Well, I was in the middle of my PhD.
Okay.
And I went to this Bonenkai, this year-end party, for mainly Japanese who had studied at the University of Michigan.
Okay.
Yeah. But at the party, I met a guy named John Gisberg, and he gave me his business card, and it said U.S. Embassy Fisheries Attaché. Now, I had no idea. What is a fisheries attaché? So I spent the evening talking to this guy about, like, what do you do? You know, I'm studying fish, but your job seems a whole heck of a lot more interesting than studying larval anchovies, right? Yeah. And so he said, well, I'm doing whaling, I'm doing tuna dolphin, I'm doing deep sea mining, I'm doing law of the sea, we're doing fishing quotas for Japanese fishing industry, fleet in U.S. waters, and on and on and on. By the end of that evening, I go, I want his job.
Or something close to it. I got to get there.
So I took the Foreign Service exam, thinking, okay, he's in the State Department. I need to get into the State Department. And they have a bureau called the Oceans and Environmental Science Bureau. So I'm thinking, okay, that's where I'll be. I'll be a scientist, diplomat, doing ocean work for the State Department for the rest of my career. So I took the exam, passed. There's an interview, got through that. And anyway, I ended up in the State Department in 1988.
Did you have to go to the States to do it, or could you do the exam here?
I did the exam here at the embassy, in the cafeteria. Yeah,
okay.
yeah, in the cafeteria.
So you can actually do that?
You can do the exam.
That?
Yeah, but the interview, you have to go to Washington.
Okay,
yeah,
right.
you have to go to Washington. Yeah, so they offer the test at various locations, major cities
right,
worldwide, yeah. And then if you pass that, then they offer you an interview.
Right.
In
But that's
DC.
interview. You're still paying for everything. They don't give you a ticket to come to
No,
DC.
no. State
So if you
Department,
can't
come on.
I'm just
Yeah, State
wondering.
Department. This is not the
Those
private
people
sector.
Right. Okay. So you got to find your way there.
You got to find my way
The
there.
date they give you, and if you make it, good. If you don't,
If you don't, it's like,
Yeah,
next.
so next, you're right.
Okay, the next person in line.
Right, exactly.
And I was fortunate to pass the interview, and they made me an offer. So the timing was such that I literally defended my dissertation one day, packed out the next day. By the end of the week, of the next week, I was in DC interviewing.
No, but you were in Hiroshima now.
Now I was in Tokyo because doing
So
my
you-
PhD. I was doing my Tokyo. I
okay.
just finished.
Where'd
my,
you do your PhD? Where?
University of Tokyo. So I did my master's in Hiroshima, and I did my PhD at Todai, and the Todai has an institute called the Ocean Research Institute. It's underneath the agriculture faculty, and it's kind of similar to, I don't know if you know Scripps or Woods Hole in the United States.
Yes.
It's kind of the Japanese equivalent
version
of
you're
that.
right.
Yeah.
Right. Wow.
So then I went into the State Department in '88, and I was there for 7 years. First assignment was Tijuana, Mexico. Yeah. And loved it. Loved it.
Did you?
And you're from LA.
Because oceans
so
are beautiful, I bet you.
Oh, it's gorgeous.
Yes.
Yeah, and we lived. I had just got married to my wife, who I met in Hiroshima.
Did you learn Spanish?
Yeah, they taught me Spanish, but I'd forgotten it all, unfortunately.
Okay, I understand. Yeah, that's what happens. Right.
So they send you to language training. Sent me to Tijuana for 18 months. That was my first assignment. And then my second assignment was here at the U.S. Embassy. Third assignment was in Washington.
But how long were you here? 3
2
years?
years. 2 years. 2 years. My second
but
assignment.
Can it vary? Because
Sure.
they can make the assignments. What's the average length? Isn't 4 years?
Once you get there's something called tenure.
Okay, once
It's
you
like
get
a
to tenure.
professor.
Now,
Then
how long
you-
does it take? How long do you have to be in to get tenure?
Well, back then, you did 2 assignments. Before
Then you had tenure.
well, you're eligible for tenure.
But doesn't,
and
doesn't
some
it
people
matter how
don't
much,
make it.
But doesn't it matter how long those assignments are? What if they were 1 year assignments?
Well, normally the first one is a year and a half.
Okay.
So the first assignment in the State Department is basically they put you in the grind of the visa grind. Your job, there's 200 people out there. You need to process them because tomorrow there'll be 200 more
You
people.
do the grunt work. I got you.
Exactly, right?
Gotcha.
And so it's just a visa mill, we call it.
Right.
And if you're in Tijuana, there's a lot of American citizen services, as you can imagine. You know, people coming down there, getting in fights, getting drunk, getting arrested, getting robbed, whatever, you name it, getting murdered. People with mental illness walking around the desert in Baja. That was an interesting story. So you have to deal with it, right? I mean, and so it's 18 months of just doing that. But it was wonderful. I mean, we loved our time in Mexico.
Did you have kids by then?
Nope.
Okay.
We came here. My second assignment had our daughter was born here in Japan. And then I went back. That was a 2-year assignment.
Now, what year did you come here?
90 to 92.
Oh, the bubble had already burst and stuff.
Exactly.
Right.
Well, the bubble technically had burst,
I mean,
but the atmosphere had not.
I know they were just saying for kiki.
Exactly.
And I told my wife, when they stop saying that, that's when they're going to feel it.
Well, there you go. So it took a while for it actually to come down.
To feel it, right.
Because in the 80s and even into the 90s, you had Japan as #1. You had Ishihara, and Morita from Sony writing that book. You had, the art of Japanese business management, and everybody was looking up to the Japanese. So what's the magic?
That's right.
That we've lost, and people believed that there was something uniquely valuable about Japanese, either government structures, industrial policy, business processes.
But didn't you have to just go to one book called the book that Deming wrote?
Yeah.
That's basically what they did. He's the one that gave them the structure. They have a big picture of him. I think it's in Toyota, Nissan, or one of them.
Yeah, exactly. So it goes back and forth, which I think is one of the fascinating things about economics and trade. And so I was when you enter the State Department, you enter with a specialty. So there are 4. One is admin, counselor, economics, or political. And in theory, you will spend most of your career doing jobs in that specialty.
Whichever one you pick.
Whichever one. Well, they kind of assign it to you. But,
do they really?
But yeah, you can turn it down, but then they might not hire you.
Then you won't hire again. But then you don't have a job.
Right. I mean, actually, what happened to me is they made me an offer as a admin officer. Okay. I said, "There's no way I'm going to do that. No, thank you." And they said, "Well, you might not get another chance to be in the Foreign Service." I said, "I'll take my chances." And then a few months later, they came back and offered me an economics position, which is what I wanted to do.
But meanwhile, wait.
I was doing my PhD at the time. So
I got you.
So I was doing my PhD while I was going through this interview process with the State Department.
Okay.
Yeah. And so going back and forth with the State Department about this cone, that cone, getting to DC, talking to my professors, working all of that out. So those were going in parallel. And then they made me an offer at the same time I finished my PhD. I mean, those things landed at the same time. And so I did my PhD, said, "Thank you very much, I'm out of here, I'm on a plane, I'm going to DC." And so in the State Department, after my first assignment, which was visas and American citizen services in Tijuana, everything after that was economics and trade. And the State Department sent me for economic training. At Michigan, I had an economics minor. And then they, micro, macro, trade economics, these kinds of things. So I studied that while I was in the State Department. And then after that was economics and trade. And so I did economics and trade here, 90 to 92. I went to Washington in the Economic Bureau on the doing Japan issues, doing Japan trade. Came back here in 94-5.
Okay. But you're married during all this time.
I was married in that tour. So daughter married the second tour.
Right.
Son was married in Virginia.
Was born.
Was born. I'm sorry. Yeah, my son was
there.
born in Virginia.
Virginia. How many years? That's 2 years.
2 years apart.
2 years apart.
They're 2 years apart. Gotcha. And then we came back, a second assignment here at the embassy, 94-5.
Right.
And I was doing trade and commerce. And then in 95, I got a call from USTR, the U.S. Trade Representative's Office. And they asked me, they said, "We have an opening. Would you be interested in coming full-time to USTR and working on U.S.-Japan trade?" And they said, well, you'll have to leave the Foreign Service. We don't want somebody on detail. We don't want somebody who's here temporary.
Right.
We want a permanent person. So you have to quit the State Department and become a GS employee, a general services
GS,
employee.
GS
Yeah.
what? 13?
Yeah,
15?
No, it wasn't 15. I
Did
think
you?
it was 13, yeah.
You wish.
Yeah, I wish. Yeah, I got there eventually.
Did you really? You stayed in long enough to get to
Well,
15?
I got there I was there for 5 years. So I was the deputy assistant U.S. trade representative for Japan.
And based in Tokyo?
Based in Washington. USTR has nobody in
Japan at all?
No.
Okay.
The U.S. trade representative.
You'd have to be in the Foreign Service in order to be able to come here, right?
Well, there's a lot of people at the embassy.
That's true.
Most of them are Foreign Service.
Right.
Some of them,
aren't.
some of them you don't want to ask where they're from.
I understand. I know.
But I mean,
they're the ones that visit the military bases.
Well, there's
with all these badges and stuff. Yeah, I know.
Well, every agency, I'm guessing every agency in Washington has somebody or some connection representative here. You could be, EPA. You could be, of course, Commerce has a big presence here.
Well, they have FBI.
Energy,
they have the DDA. They have everything. They're all
exactly.
here.
And they should, because there's important issues to talk to the Japanese about in all of these areas.
We have Americans in all these areas too. So
Exactly. So it's good to be here to be able to exchange views with the Japanese government on all of the things that the two governments interact on.
Would that be the same for other countries that have embassies in our countries?
I think most of them, yeah.
Like the Japanese
think so.
have equivalent to what we have
here,
there?
Well, I don't know if everybody, but the Japanese have quite a few. Yeah, they have quite a big presence in Washington, D.C. Right. And they have consulates all over the United States.
Right.
Collecting, working with businesses, helping Japanese invest in locally or local companies to do business in Japan. Right. So there's a very deep relationship between the two countries. So when I was at USTR from this was the second Clinton administration, the second term, and I was a trade negotiator. I was the deputy assistant U.S. trade representative for Japan. And I was in charge of leading trade negotiations.
Now, your Japanese had already been up to speed.
Yeah, I learned my Japanese when I was
Did you read and write as well?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so I learned my Japanese when I was doing my master's and PhD here.
Right.
So I entered the State Department with Japanese.
Okay.
And so while I was at USTR, it was a very busy period. You probably remember there was a lot of trade tension. And the Clinton administration they had something called the Framework Agreement, which was their approach to Japan. And it was a very robust, very broad set of negotiations, mainly sectorial. Telecommunications, automobiles, glass, paper. It wasn't structural issues. It wasn't competition policy. It wasn't antitrust. Wasn't lawyers. Wasn't regulatory. It was trade, goods, primarily. So I was responsible for several of those negotiations, including deregulation, which included telecommunications, lawyers, wood products, but also healthcare. And so we did a very important agreement on deregulation of pharmaceuticals and medical devices.
That's right. Wait, now what years are we talking now? 1990?
96,
7?
90, no. Yeah, 96, 7.
Exactly.
Exactly.
That's what I thought.
Exactly.
Because I was in the medical equipment business then.
Yeah.
And I was close with the chamber.
Yep.
Yeah, I remember all that.
Yep. And I was the guy negotiating.
Right. Wow.
And so one of the things.
But you weren't here then.
No, based in Washington.
You're still in Washington D.C.
Right.
Did you ever were you coming here ever?
Often. Often.
But for the State Department?
I was talking to my State Department colleagues here.
Right.
They were supporting me.
Right.
But also the Commerce officials here and Treasury officials here.
And also your wife?
Well, my wife was in Washington with 2 small kids. We're living in Virginia. Okay, we're living in Virginia. She's got 2 small kids, and I'm not there most of the time. Right. Either I'm here, or even if I'm physically in Washington, I'm on the phone late at night talking to the embassy. 2 or 3 in the morning, taking a phone call with the embassy, going into work at 8 o'clock in the morning. So we had this deal with my wife. When you might appreciate this. When I got the offer at USTR, I knew it was going to be a full-time. It would require 100% of my attention. And I said, look, I can't split the house chores and do this job the way it needs to get done. So I said, give me 3 to 5 years. You take care of the kids, you take care of the house. I'll mow the lawn, but but you take care. I'm not going to have the bandwidth to do this job and the household responsibilities.
Now you knew this already?
Yeah, I knew what the job would entail.
You talked to enough people and everything.
I knew what the job entailed because I had been on, when I was in the State Department, I had participated in several trade negotiations.
So you already knew, okay.
Yeah. So if you think of those trade negotiations, there's all these people sitting on the one side.
Been there, done that.
And most of them are like different agencies.
Right.
But the person in the middle often is somebody from USTR. So I was at the end until I joined USTR, and then I was the person in the middle actually leading the negotiations. So I'd been through these all-nighters. So I knew what it entailed. And at the time, it's hard to appreciate it now, but at the time, U.S.-Japan relations was the most important economic issue on the president's agenda.
That's right.
It was absolutely the number one issue.
So what did your wife say to you?
She said, okay, I'll give you 3 to 5 years.
Only?
So at the end of 3 years, she said, did you send out your resume? No, I'm still busy. For 4 years? Nope, not yet. 5 years, she said, time's up.
She really did. She said, that's it.
And she said, that's it. I'm not doing this. I've done this for 5 years. I've, basically.
Now, what did she do? Did she go to college as well?
Yeah.
She did?
She was at Hiroshima University.
She went to which one?
Hiroshima.
Hiroshima University.
Yeah,
to
so
study
we met
what?
at Hiroshima
What'd
University.
she study?
She's an artist.
An artist, okay.
Yeah, she did glass art.
All right. So she didn't have a career that was demanding that she needed to go to or anything like that.
Correct.
So she said, okay, I'll be
right.
the mother to my kids, and not the mother, but I'll take care of the house stuff, and
right.
I'll have your back.
Exactly.
Right.
That's
a
perfect way. That's the perfect way to put it.
Right.
Yeah, that's the perfect way to put it.
And she did it for 5?
Yeah. And then
what happened?
At the end of 5 years, she says, time's up. And then at the end of 5 years, the administration was changing.
Right.
So, we're going into 2000 and the 2000 election. And that transition period between administrations is always kind of a dead period. The last year of the outgoing administration and the first year of the incoming is kind of, there's nothing happening.
Right, nobody knows, yeah.
Yeah, because the Japanese are not going to listen to the people who are leaving.
Right.
And the people who have just arrived haven't gotten their act together to make any demands yet.
That's right.
So for 2 years, I'm going to be sitting on my hands. And so I started looking for jobs in the private sector.
In the States?
Here.
Okay.
And so we wanted to raise our children bilingual, bicultural.
Now, how old are they by this time? 5, 6?
Let's see, this is 2000, so 6 and 8.
6 and 8. Close, okay.
And so we wanted to get back here to raise them bilingual, bicultural, and there was, if I couldn't stay at USTR and do that. As I mentioned, there's no USTR position here at the embassy. And I had already left the State Department. So the only way back here was in the private sector. And so I started looking around for opportunities. And one of the negotiations I did was the 1996 insurance agreement. And that got me connected to people in the Ministry of Finance and the U.S. financial industry. And so I started shopping around, and it turns out Goldman was looking for somebody to run their government affairs here. But also Eli Lilly was looking for somebody to run their government affairs here because, as I mentioned, I had done pharmaceuticals. But I took the Goldman job. So I got 2 offers. I took the Goldman job. And we came back here in 2000.
Okay.
And I was the vice president for government affairs for Goldman Sachs for a couple of years. And learned a very important lesson. Never take a job that doesn't align with your values.
Oh, that's right.
You know,
they were going through, yes.
Yeah,
I hear you.
yeah, I don't want to disparage
I
any
hear you.
particular
No, I
company.
got it.
But you want to, I learned that you want to wake up every day
And feel good about
and
it.
feel and have a personal, you want to feel good about what you do, and that you're making a difference somehow in a positive way that aligns with my values.
But that wasn't unique to Goldman.
No, it's not. That's why I'm not saying
that
it.
was no, but it was with all the financial institutions at that time.
You're right. Yeah, I'm a marine biologist by training.
Right.
I'm not comfortable talking about money from morning to night.
I hear you.
It's important. Companies need to make money. Companies need to be profit. But can't we talk about something else for 5 minutes?
But there was so much of it being, pushed around. That's what it was.
Yeah.
And people that had never had access to anything like that.
Right.
Finally had access to it, and their dreams were just coming true.
Exactly. Exactly. I mean,
They were partying as hard as they were working. Man, it was crazy.
We've all seen Wolves of Wall Street.
That's right. Yeah, really.
And so,
Yeah.
After,
So how long
after
did it last?
2 years.
2 years.
And then a friend of mine who worked at the Nature Conservancy. I don't know if you've heard of them.
Yeah, here in Japan, right?
Well, Lori
Right.
Foreman
Yes.
ran their Japan operations, and for a number of years. And she had always said, Byron, you ought to come to the Nature Conservancy. You're a marine biologist. The work we do, conserving rainforests and coral reefs, and you'd be perfect for this. And I said, yeah, it sounds interesting, but there was no job there. I mean, there's nothing to do for me. She ran the program, and so when Bush got elected, W got elected, she went and took a position in the Bush administration. So her job, running the Japan program for the Nature Conservancy, came open. I applied and got it. And I told them, look, I keep my kids in the international school, keep a roof over our head, and I don't care what you pay me. Because I would do this job for free.
That's how much you really
and I'll remember, I remember a trip, we took some potential partners to Borneo, and I'm sitting in the rainforest. And I'm getting paid for this.
You know what I mean?
I'm sitting in the rainforest.
That's a beautiful feeling,
And
isn't it?
this is my job, is protecting this. I go, man, it was the best job I ever had. However, there was a telecommunications IT bubble burst, and the Nature Conservancy's funding constricted considerably, because a lot of those IT entrepreneurs were giving their excess money to the Nature Conservancy. Okay. And when they no longer had excess money, the Nature Conservancy's budget constricted. And they said, yeah, we can't afford to keep you in Japan. So then I started looking for another job.
How long did that last? 2 years?
That was about 2 years, 2.5 years.
Okay.
And Eli Lilly was still looking for somebody. And so I took a job with Eli Lilly as their head of corporate affairs, policy, policy, pricing, market access, patient advocacy, communications. And this is a long story, but after that, Lilly to Baxter to Amgen. So about 15, 16 years in healthcare, all focused on policy, pharmaceutical pricing, market access. And then I retired when I hit 65.
What was the last company?
Amgen. They're based in Thousand Oaks, California.
But you were here in Japan.
Yep. So I would, the
You
whole
were
time.
you were in operation here, right?
Right. So the whole time I'm in Japan. So when
Well, how many of those did you
USTR,
run? How many of those did you run? Those companies?
I didn't run the companies. I was
you didn't do any of them?
I wasn't the GM.
They were all okay. I got you.
I was the head of corporate affairs,
Okay.
reporting to the local GM.
I hear you.
So I was on the leadership committee.
I understand.
Of all of those companies, and so all of the directors and executive directors reporting to the local GM, who reported to global. Mm-hmm. And then I had dotted lines to global and things like that.
Were you able to keep your kids
in the American school? Right.
You didn't put them in Japanese school at all?
Nope. They went all the way through American school.
ESIJ?
Yep.
Okay.
ESIJ.
And they graduated from ESIJ, and then they went into college?
In the United States.
In the U.S., okay.
Yeah.
Right. So how's your Japanese?
They're Japanese?
Yes.
Oh, the Japanese is really good, actually.
But how did they? When did they start focusing on it? Did you have did they tutor or something? Yeah.
No, our son picked it up. he was younger, and I think he had an advantage when he first came. He was younger and he was a boy. And so when he's younger and you're a boy, you just want to play ball. And you figure out how to, if you don't speak the language, you figure out.
He's playing with just Japanese kids.
Just Japanese kids in the neighborhood
gotcha,
and things like that, right? I
Okay.
mean, it's just like you just figure it out. And girls are a little bit more cerebral.
Right.
You know,
Tell me about that a whole lot more.
Yeah, and when they're older, you know, I think there's a little bit more social, and that can be wonderful, but it can also make it a little difficult if you don't feel comfortable speaking a language. And so I think our daughter was a little reluctant to speak Japanese at first, but her Japanese is, I mean,
She picked it up.
Well, she picked it up, and she went to the University of Michigan for a while, and then came back and graduated from Waseda.
So the ages, both of them graduated from Waseda? Or
She graduated from Waseda,
Waseda.
and he graduated from a little liberal arts school in Iowa called Grinnell, not
I've
Cornell.
heard of Grinnell, yeah.
Grinnell,
Yeah,
Iowa.
but that's not bad. It's
No,
really
it's a-
good.
no, it's a
Yes,
great
good
school.
It is.
And then he went from there to the National Institutes of Health for a couple years of research. Came here to do his master's at the University of Tokyo in global public health. Went to the London School of Economics to do a master's in data science, health data science. And this fall, he enrolled at the Washington University in St. Louis in medical school. So he's a first-year medical student at
To
Washington
become what?
University. Some kind of doctor.
He doesn't know?
He doesn't. Oh, his first year, he doesn't know.
He doesn't know.
He's got a couple years to figure it out.
Does he have anything that he likes? Is he into?
He knows he doesn't want to be a surgeon.
I was going to say, does he?
Yeah. You don't want my son anywhere around you with a knife.
He's not
And-
interested.
no,
Okay, right.
he
Doesn't have that kind of
he doesn't
dexterity.
have that
Doesn't have
dexterity.
dexterity.
Exactly.
Gotcha,
Exactly.
So how old are you? So your son, what is he? 35?
Our son?
Yes.
No, our son's 29, and
20, I was gonna say,
he's 29. She's 31.
She's 31. Okay, so they're still very young.
Yeah, I agree. I
And
agree.
they traveled around like their father did. That's what they're doing.
Yes.
That's all they've known, though.
Yeah, they've traveled. Yeah, and we
That's
take
all
vacations.
they've ever
yeah.
known. Yeah.
I think that's important. I mean, you've been here for a long
That's right.
time, and
So neither are here now. They're both.
no, our daughter is here. now.
She's here.
Our daughter's in Tokyo, and she's working.
Okay.
And our son is in medical school in St. Louis at Washington University.
I know you have to be proud of him.
Yeah, I'm proud of both of them. And,
I know. I'm sure you are.
Yeah, I mean, it's, getting into medical school is a long slog. I mean, the process is nuts. I mean, it's just nuts.
I know. I think that's anywhere you get a medical license. Yeah.
I think, I mean, higher education in the United States has really been, I think, I don't know another term, I think it's been financialized.
Of course.
And
but so have the. Well, yeah. Right.
in the sense that when I went to school, there wasn't this overemphasis on STEM. Yeah, sure, we had a great engineering department, and we had a lot of people in the sciences and stuff. But there were great, philosophy departments, and there were great history departments, and linguistics was one of the top schools at the University of Michigan. And now all of that has been degraded because it doesn't pay. And so I think what we're doing to higher education in the United States is there's a whole realm of the humanities that we are totally abandoning to our detriment. STEM stuff is important, but we're all not going to be engineers. And some of those engineers need a grounding in philosophy and ethics.
And the arts. The arts. They're just not. That's true.
And
because
history.
Life, is very short, but there's certain things you want to have in it.
And you want to make the right decisions. Right. You want to live a fulfilling life, but you need context.
That's right.
And people who have done nothing but software engineering, I don't want them running the world.
We've already had.
They're
He
getting
just
there.
went through that.
Right.
He's been going through that.
And it's the same. People need what I've learned is, I've had a very varied career.
Right.
Is everything gives context to whatever I'm doing now.
Right. That's what I was going to ask you. You're retired now, and you've been retired for 2 years now?
Yeah, and I teach part-time, and I have my own little one-man consultancy.
Okay. What do you teach?
I teach economics and trade at Tokyo University.
You're not teaching the larva of...
I'm not the anchovies. No, I'm not doing that.
You're not doing that? Come on.
I'd be talking to myself.
Come on,
in a mirror. I'd have one student, and he would look exactly like me.
Byron, before we end the
Sure,
podcast, there's a
sure.
question I always like to ask everyone.
Sure.
In your 67 years of life on this planet, with all the knowledge, all the places you've been through, if you could magically go back in time and meet the younger Byron and give him advice, how old would you be? How old would that younger Byron be, and what advice would you give him?
I try to live without regrets. You make the best decision you can at the time, and you know, maybe it was the right decision, maybe it was the wrong decision, but at the time, it was the right decision. So why I can't lose sleep over the fact that it didn't work out. Yeah. So if I was younger, what would I do? I probably wouldn't have studied larval anchovies.
Then we wouldn't have had such a good conversation. Come on now. That was the start of it. That was good.
You know,
What advice would you give yourself, and how old would you be when you gave yourself that advice? What age do you think you needed it?
Well, I think, you know, getting through high school, most people, a lot of who we are is formed really very early, maybe, you know, before we even start school. You know, your values, you know, you know, there's basically sorry, this is not an answer to the question, but you know, one of the things it's a parental philosophy. I think there's basically 3 things you teach your kids. You teach them right from wrong. Yeah, that's fundamental. This is right and that's wrong. You teach them how to make decisions so they can choose between right and wrong. And then you teach them how to treat people. And if my kids can do those 3 things, I've been a pretty good parent.
Would you give yourself advice? And if you would, what would it be?
Yeah.
Now, would you give yourself advice? That's another thing.
Yeah, I think I would. I think, thinking back, you know, at times it's easy to be judgmental. Assume I understand what the other person's going through. You know, assume I know their situation, why they're doing what they're doing. And often I could be wrong, was wrong. So I think I'd be more, I don't know if understanding's the right word, you know, trying to give the person the extra benefit of the doubt.
Thank you so much, Byron.
It's a pleasure.
Being
Thank
here.
you.
It's fantastic. I want to thank all of you for watching and or listening to this podcast. And never forget, it's all on loan, so continue to reach for the stars.
Because you're too blessed to be stressed.